Have you ever felt that spiritual emptiness gnawing at your soul as you rush through another hectic day? The alarm blares at 6 a.m. You scroll through endless notifications before your feet even touch the floor. Rush through breakfast if you have it at all. Battle traffic, work through lunch, answer emails until your eyes burn, then collapse into bed, only to do it all again tomorrow. In those rare moments of silence, perhaps while waiting for your coffee to brew or sitting at a red light, you feel it a whisper of something missing. A hunger no amount of busyness can satisfy. Where is God in all of this chaos? How can you possibly nurture your spiritual life when every minute is already accounted for? What if I told you that Saint Ignatius of Loyola, a man who experienced the depths of spiritual transformation, discovered that God isn't asking for your entire day or even an hour? What if the path to profound spiritual awakening could begin with just 15 seconds? This isn't about squeezing one more obligation into your day. It's about discovering the sacred space that already exists within the rhythm of your ordinary life. When we think about prayer, we often imagine lengthy sessions of quiet contemplation, perhaps kneeling in a church pew or sitting in perfect stillness at home with a prayer book open before us. We feel guilty when we can't dedicate substantial time to our spiritual lives, believing that meaningful connection with God requires long periods of uninterrupted devotion. This misconception has created a spiritual barrier for countless people living in our fast-paced modern world. The beauty of Ignatian spirituality lies in its radical practicality and its profound understanding of human nature. Ignatius of Loyola was not a man detached from the realities of everyday life. Before his conversion, he was a soldier and a courtier, immersed in the busyness and ambitions of worldly existence. Even after his spiritual transformation, he founded an order of priests who would be active in the world, not cloistered away from it. Ignatius understood that true spirituality must be accessible within the context of our daily lives, not separate from them. His revolutionary insight was that God is present in all things, in every moment, in every breath we take. This means that spiritual connection doesn't require escaping from your life, it requires becoming fully present to the life you already have. The 15-second prayer that Ignatius developed, which would later become known as the Examen, is not about adding another task to your day. It's about creating brief, sacred pauses that transform how you experience everything else. Consider for a moment what happens in your mind when you wake up in the morning. For most of us, consciousness arrives with an immediate flood of thoughts about what needs to be accomplished, worries about upcoming challenges, perhaps regrets about things left undone the day before. This mental chatter creates a veil between us and reality, between us and God. We move through our days on autopilot, rarely fully present to what is happening right now. Ignatius recognized this human tendency centuries before psychologists would document it. He saw how our minds pull us constantly into the past, or push us anxiously toward the future, while the present moment, the only moment in which we can actually encounter God, slips by unnoticed. His solution was brilliantly simple. Create intentional pauses throughout the day, brief moments of awareness where we step out of automatic pilot and into conscious presence. 15 seconds of full presence can become a doorway through which divine grace flows into everyday life. Think about the power of this approach. Rather than seeing your spiritual life as something separate from your daily activities, something you can only attend to when you have cleared enough space in your schedule, the Ignatian way invites you to discover God within the very fabric of your ordinary experiences. This isn't spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. It's a profound recognition that the boundary we've created between sacred and secular is an illusion. As Ignatius famously taught, we can find God in all things. At this point, I want to connect with you more personally. Have you ever experienced a moment of unexpected grace in the midst of your ordinary day? Perhaps a sudden awareness of beauty in something you see every day, a feeling of gratitude that washes over you without warning, or a sense of being held by something greater than yourself even during a difficult time? If these moments sound familiar, I invite you to share in the comments with the words, "I've glimpsed grace in the ordinary." Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to recognize similar moments in their own lives. Sometimes, just naming these experiences helps us become more attentive to them, more receptive to their frequency in our everyday existence. The simple act of acknowledging these encounters with grace creates a community of seekers who can remind each other that we're not alone in our spiritual hunger or in our moments of connection. The theological depth of Ignatian spirituality rests on a foundational paradox, that God is both transcendent beyond our full comprehension and immanent intimately present in every aspect of creation. This understanding challenges the dualistic thinking that separates spiritual practices from everyday life. In traditional religious contexts, we often learn to compartmentalize sacred activities as distinct from secular ones. We go to church or temple, then we go to work. We pray, then we play. We study scripture, then we scroll through social media. But Ignatius offers a radically integrated vision where this separation dissolves. His spiritual approach wasn't merely about adding religious practices to an already busy life, but about transforming our perception so that we recognize the sacred dimension already present in everything we do. This is what makes the 15-second prayer so revolutionary. It's not primarily about the words you say, or even the thoughts you think during those seconds. It's about the quality of awareness you bring to that brief moment, an awareness that can gradually extend into more and more of your waking hours. When Ignatius invites us to find God in all things, he's not suggesting that we should see everything through rose-colored glasses. Rather, he's pointing to a deeper reality beneath the surface of appearances, a divine presence that pervades all of creation, including the messy, painful, and mundane aspects of human experience. This understanding is reflected in the life of Ignatius himself. After being seriously wounded in battle, he underwent a profound conversion during his long and painful recovery. Confined to bed with nothing to read but the life of Christ and stories of the saints, he began to notice something crucial about his inner experience. When he daydreamed about returning to his former life of worldly pursuits and romantic conquests, he initially felt excitement, but afterwards experienced a lingering emptiness. But when he imagined following in the footsteps of the saints, though it seemed difficult, he felt a lasting peace and joy. This discernment of his internal states became the foundation of his approach to spiritual life. The practical genius of Ignatius lies in his systematic approach to spiritual growth. He didn't rely on vague inspirational ideas or emotional experiences alone. Instead, he developed concrete practices that could transform daily life into a continuous encounter with God. His most famous contribution, the Spiritual Exercises, represents a comprehensive program for spiritual transformation. But the essence of his approach can be distilled into simple practices accessible to anyone, regardless of their theological background or available time. The 15-second prayer practice embodies this accessibility. It begins with a moment of awareness, simply stopping and noticing where you are, how you feel, and what's happening around you. Then comes a moment of gratitude, recognizing something specific to appreciate in that exact moment. Next is attentiveness, asking where God might be present in this particular situation. And finally, there's a moment of intention, choosing how to move forward with greater purpose. This entire process can happen in just 15 seconds, though its effects ripple outward into everything that follows. Ignatius recognized a fundamental truth about human nature. We become what we repeatedly do. Modern neuroscience confirms what he intuited centuries ago, that our brains are constantly being shaped by our habits of thought and attention. When we practice noticing God's presence in small moments throughout our day, we gradually rewire our neural pathways to make this awareness more automatic. 15 seconds of intentional presence, practiced regularly, can literally change the structure of your brain over time. This isn't merely positive thinking, it's practical neuroplasticity applied to spiritual growth. Consider how this might transform your experience of waiting in line at the grocery store, sitting in traffic, or washing dishes. These moments we typically consider wasted time or mere transitions between important activities become opportunities for spiritual connection. The barriers we face in implementing this practice aren't primarily external, they're internal. Our minds resist the discomfort of presence, preferring to escape into planning, remembering, or ruminating. Our egos resist the vulnerability that comes with genuine openness to God's presence. Our cultural conditioning resists the countercultural act of pausing when everything around us demands acceleration. This is why Ignatius emphasized the importance of persistence and regular examination. He understood that spiritual growth isn't a straight line but a spiral path of practice, reflection, adjustment, and deeper practice. When we examine the pivotal moments in Ignatius's own life, we find a man who was constantly learning through experience and reflection. After his conversion, He spent nearly a year in prayer and penance in a cave near Manresa, Spain. During this time, he experienced powerful spiritual insights, but also devastating periods of scrupulosity, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. What makes his story so compelling isn't that he was perfect or that his path was easy, but that he used every experience, including his failures and dark nights of the soul, as opportunities to deepen his understanding of how God works in human lives. His approach to spirituality was empirical rather than merely theoretical. He tested practices, observed their effects, refined his understanding, and shared what he learned with others. This experimental attitude towards spiritual growth is refreshingly practical in a realm often characterized by rigid prescriptions or vague platitudes. It reminds us that our own spiritual path is a journey of discovery, not the mechanical implementation of someone else's formula. The 15-second prayer practice embodies this experimental approach. You're invited to try it, observe its effects in your own life, and adapt it to your unique circumstances. While the structure provides helpful guidance, the heart of the practice is your authentic engagement with the present moment and openness to God's presence within it. Comparing Ignatius to other spiritual figures can illuminate the distinctiveness of his approach. Unlike some monastic traditions that emphasized withdrawal from worldly concerns, Ignatius founded an order specifically committed to engagement with the world. Unlike some mystics who focused primarily on extraordinary experiences of union with God, Ignatius emphasized finding God in ordinary activities. Unlike purely contemplative traditions, Ignatian spirituality balances contemplation with action, what he called being contemplatives in action. This balanced approach makes his spiritual wisdom particularly relevant to contemporary life. We don't need to choose between being spiritual and being engaged with the world. In fact, authentic spirituality should enhance our capacity to love and serve others right where we are. The 15-second prayer practice exemplifies this integration. It doesn't require retreating from life's activities. It transforms how we experience those activities from within. Saint Teresa of Avila, a Spanish mystic and contemporary of Ignatius, emphasized that God walks among the pots and pans. Ignatius would heartily agree. The divine presence isn't confined to churches, meditation cushions, or retreat centers. God is as fully present in your kitchen, your office, and your car as in any cathedral. The internal obstacles to practicing this kind of awareness are significant. Our minds are conditioned to judge experiences as either important or unimportant, pleasant or unpleasant, spiritual or secular. Breaking down these artificial categories requires persistent effort and grace. When we begin to practice the 15-second prayer, we often encounter resistance in the form of distraction, boredom, skepticism, or simply forgetting. These are not signs of failure, but natural parts of the process of rewiring deeply ingrained habits of perception. Ignatius would encourage us to be patient with ourselves, to notice without judgment when we've been carried away by mental chatter, and to gently return to presence. He understood that spiritual growth happens not in a smooth upward trajectory, but in a rhythm of effort, failure, renewed commitment, and unexpected breakthrough. The process itself, with all its imperfections, is where transformation occurs. This compassionate realism about human nature is one of the most appealing aspects of Ignatian spirituality. It offers neither harsh perfectionism nor complacent acceptance of spiritual mediocrity, but rather a middle path of persistent, grace-filled effort. So how might this approach transform your daily life? Imagine waking up and, before reaching for your phone, taking 15 seconds to become aware of your breath, to feel gratitude for the gift of a new day, to ask where God might be present in the hours ahead, and to set an intention to move through your day with greater love and awareness. Imagine taking 15 seconds before an important meeting to center yourself, to remember your deeper values, to notice any anxiety or attachment to outcomes, and to open yourself to guidance. Imagine pausing for 15 seconds when you feel frustrated with a family member, using that brief space to see beyond the irritation to the beloved child of God before you. These moments don't require additional time in your schedule, they require presence within the time you already have. The cumulative effect of these brief pauses can be profound. They create space for grace to enter, for wisdom to arise, for compassion to flow. They interrupt patterns of reactivity and create possibilities for more conscious choice. They remind us of who we truly are and what really matters. Over time, they can transform not just individual moments, but the entire texture of our lives. One of the most beautiful aspects of this approach is that it doesn't require perfect consistency to be effective. You don't need to remember to pause every hour on the hour or to maintain an unbroken chain of daily practice. Each moment of presence stands on its own as a complete encounter with God. Each 15-second pause is valuable regardless of what came before or what follows after. This removes the all-or-nothing perfectionism that often derails spiritual practices. If you forget for hours or even days, the invitation to presence remains eternally available in the next moment. This is the nature of grace, always offered, never forced, patiently waiting for our return. The 15-second prayer is less about achieving spiritual goals and more about accepting an ever-present invitation to communion. It shifts our understanding of spiritual life from linear achievement to cyclical return, from earning to receiving, from striving to consenting. This shift itself represents a profound healing for many of us raised in achievement-oriented cultures, where even spirituality can become another arena for perfectionism and competition. When we contrast this approach with superficial religious practices, the difference is striking. Many of us were taught that spirituality is primarily about following rules, performing rituals correctly, or adhering to moral codes. While these elements have their place, they can become empty forms divorced from the living relationship they were meant to serve. Ignatius recognized that authentic spirituality flows from direct experience of God's love, not merely from intellectual assent to doctrines or mechanical performance of religious duties. The 15-second prayer practice bypasses many of the barriers that have accumulated around traditional religious expression. It doesn't require special knowledge, ritual objects, specific locations, or particular words. It meets you exactly where you are and invites you into a direct relationship with the divine presence already there. This accessibility makes it a powerful entry point for those who have been wounded by religious institutions or who feel alienated from formal religious practice. It offers a way to reconnect with the living source that all authentic traditions point toward, without getting caught in the human constructions that sometimes obscure that source. But what about the challenges of maintaining this practice in a culture designed to capture and monetize our attention? How do we create these sacred pauses when notifications constantly interrupt our awareness, when algorithms are specifically engineered to keep us scrolling, when economic pressures demand ever-increasing productivity? These are real obstacles, and Ignatius would be the first to acknowledge them. The spiritual path always unfolds within specific historical and cultural contexts, each presenting unique challenges and opportunities. Our digital age makes constant distraction easier than ever before, yet it also provides unprecedented access to spiritual teachings and communities of practice. The key lies not in rejecting modern technology, but in using it intentionally, in creating boundaries that serve our deeper values, in remembering that tools are meant to serve human flourishing rather than the other way around. Some people find it helpful to use their devices as allies in this process, setting gentle reminders to pause throughout the day. Others designate certain transitions such as entering or leaving a building, starting the car, or washing hands as cues for their 15-second practice. The specific implementation is less important than the underlying commitment to creating these brief sacred pauses amidst the flow of activity. Common doubts often arise when people begin this practice. Some wonder if such brief moments can really make a difference. Others question whether they're doing it correctly, or if they should be experiencing particular feelings or insights during these pauses. Still others worry that their minds are too busy or distracted for the practice to work. Ignatius would approach these doubts with both compassion and clarity. He would affirm that even the smallest openings to grace are significant, that the practice is less about technique than intention, that noticing your distractions is itself a form of growing awareness, and that God works uniquely in each person's life. He would encourage persistence without rigidity, effort without striving, patience without complacency. Most importantly, he would remind us that the ultimate purpose of the practice is not self-improvement, but deeper communion with God and more loving service to others. When we lose sight of this purpose, even the most diligent spiritual practice can become another form of self-absorption. As we begin to integrate these 15-second pauses into our daily rhythms, we often notice subtle shifts in our experience. Colors may seem more vivid, sensations more immediate, connections with others more meaningful. We may find ourselves less reactive to minor irritations, more capable of responding thoughtfully rather than reacting habitually. We might notice increased synchronicities or meaningful coincidences, or simply a greater sense of coherence and purpose in our daily activities. Tasks that once seemed merely obligatory may reveal unexpected dimensions of beauty or significance. Relationships might deepen as we become more fully present to the people in our lives. These changes typically don't happen all at once, but accumulate gradually through consistent practice. They represent not the acquisition of something new, but the removal of obstacles to what has always been true. The 15-second prayer doesn't create God's presence in your life. It simply helps you notice and consent to the presence that has been there all along, sustaining your very existence from moment to moment. The paradox at the heart of this practice is that it simultaneously acknowledges the value of every passing moment and relativizes the importance of any particular outcome or achievement. When we truly enter the present moment, we touch something eternal that transcends time's flow. This experience can transform our relationship with time itself, freeing us from both nostalgia for the past and anxiety about the future. It doesn't eliminate planning or memory, but it grounds them in a deeper awareness that infuses them with wisdom and perspective. In a culture obsessed with productivity and measurable outcomes, this shift represents a quiet revolution. It suggests that the most valuable moments in our lives might not be those filled with obvious achievement or excitement, but rather those simple moments of presence and connection that we typically overlook. The 15-second prayer practice trains us to notice and appreciate these moments, gradually reorienting our values around what truly nourishes our souls, rather than what merely satisfies our egos or impresses others. This reorientation aligns with the central Ignatian principle of seeking the mages, the more universal good, rather than merely personal preference or social convention. When we regularly pause to connect with the deeper dimension of reality, we naturally begin to discern what truly serves love and life. Our choices become less driven by cultural programming or unconscious fears, and more aligned with our authentic values and sense of purpose. This doesn't necessarily lead to dramatic external changes. You might continue in the same job, relationship, and community, but the quality of your presence and intention within those contexts can be transformed. You might find yourself speaking truth more courageously, listening more attentively, serving more generously, and loving more freely, not because you should, but because you want to. Because these actions flow naturally from your growing awareness of the divine presence permeating all things. The 15-second prayer gradually dissolves the artificial boundary between spiritual practice and ethical action, revealing them as two aspects of the same movement toward greater wholeness and communion. As we approach the conclusion of our reflection, let's return to the original question. Why did God ask for just 15 seconds? Perhaps because God understands our human condition so intimately, the limitations of our attention spans, the pressures of our busy lives, the gradual nature of genuine transformation. Perhaps because God's generosity is such that any sincere turning of our hearts, however brief, creates an opening for grace to enter and work within us. Perhaps because God wants us to understand that spiritual growth isn't primarily about the quantity of time we dedicate, but the quality of presence we bring. Or perhaps most radically, because God isn't actually separate from us, counting the minutes we spend in devotional activities, but is rather the very ground of our being, the loving awareness that looks out through our eyes, that breathes our breath, that beats our hearts. From this perspective, the 15-second prayer isn't about connecting with a distant deity, but about remembering our true nature and deepest identity. It's about awakening to what has always been true, but forgotten in the dream of separation. This awakening doesn't happen all at once, but in brief moments of recognition that gradually become more frequent and sustained, until they eventually reveal themselves as the continuous underlying reality of our existence. If these reflections on finding God in brief moments throughout your day have touched something in your heart, I invite you to subscribe to this channel where we explore together the path toward a deeper and more authentic faith. Each week we share teachings inspired by the lives of the saints to transform our spiritual life and draw closer to God in the midst of our everyday experiences. The wisdom of Saint Ignatius offers practical pathways to integrate contemplation and action, to find the sacred within the secular, to discover eternal meaning in temporal moments. You are not alone in this search. Many of us are trying to live with greater awareness and love in today's distracted and divided world. Thank you for sharing this moment of reflection. Your presence here is already a sign of grace at work in your life. The fact that you've stayed with this exploration suggests a spiritual hunger that is itself a gift. a divine invitation to greater intimacy with the source of all life. The transformative power of Ignatian spirituality lies in its profound yet practical understanding of how divine grace works within human experience. Ignatius discovered that God's action in our lives isn't typically dramatic or disruptive, but gentle and respectful, operating within the ordinary circumstances of our days, inviting rather than imposing transformation. The 15-second prayer practice honors this divine pedagogy. It doesn't demand heroic spiritual feats or extraordinary experiences. It simply creates small openings through which grace can flow, gradually reshaping our perceptions and priorities from within. This approach acknowledges both human limitation and divine possibility, both our need for concrete practices and the ultimate mystery that transcends all techniques and methods. It balances effort and surrender in a dance of cooperation with grace. As we conclude, I invite you to try this practice today. Not tomorrow when you might have more time, not once you've read more books about spirituality, but right now in the next 15 seconds. Become aware of your breath. Feel your body sitting or standing where you are. Notice the sounds and sensations around you. In this awareness, recognize the gift of this exact moment of life. Ask where God might be present right here, right now, and set an intention for how you'll move forward from this moment with greater love and presence. That's it. You've just practiced the 15-second prayer. It's that simple and that profound. The invitation is always available. In every moment of every day, the divine presence is always there, whether noticed or unnoticed. Your spiritual life isn't dependent on perfect practices or special experiences, but on your willingness to open again and again to the love that sustains your very existence. In the beautiful words that Ignatius himself prayed, "Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will, all I have and call my own. You have given all to me. To you, Lord, I return it. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace. That is enough for me." In just 15 seconds, repeated throughout your day, you participate in this profound surrender and receiving. You touch eternity within time. You discover that what seemed like merely a spiritual technique is actually a love story unfolding in the most ordinary moments of your life. And in that discovery, everything is transformed not by your effort alone, but by the grace that has been waiting only for your consent. May you experience the joy of that transformation, 15 seconds at a time, today and every day.